The planet Taraxis floated quietly at the edge of the Volari star cluster, a world known for its peace and beauty. Blue seas covered most of its surface, and tall silver towers shone under 3 suns. The people of Taraxis, called the Volari, were known as thinkers, not warriors. They believed in solving problems through calm talks, logic, and understanding. Among them was Siran, a historian who had spent his life studying the stories of different worlds. He loved to listen, to write, and to keep memories alive. Siran believed that every event, every choice, and every life was a part of history that should never be forgotten. But now, Siran faced something he had never imagined, a galactic war. The enemy was the Dravok swarm, a terrifying species that moved from star to star like a living storm. They had no diplomacy, no mercy, and no goal other than to consume. They destroyed planets, cities, and entire species. Even the strongest empires fell before them. The Volari had always avoided war, but when 3 of their colonies vanished under the Dravok wave, they knew silence would no longer save them. They had to stand with others or vanish from existence. So the Alliance of Free Worlds was formed. Dozens of alien species joined together to fight the Dravok. The Volari sent ships, scientists, and 1 historian, Siran, to record the events. Siran never thought he would meet the race called humans. He had heard stories, tales of strange creatures from a blue planet far away, beings who had once fought among themselves but united when the stars called. The Volari saw them as unpredictable, emotional, and dangerous, but now, the humans were part of the alliance too. When Siran's ship landed on the Joint Defense Command Station, he stepped into a vast metal corridor filled with sounds and lights. Soldiers of many species walked side by side, tall scaled warriors from Corin, 4-armed builders from Erix, and the small but clever insectoid Kinara. Then he saw them, the humans. They looked almost fragile. Their bodies were soft and their skin had no protective scales. Their eyes, though, were filled with something strange, a spark that Siran could not name. Some humans were laughing, others shouting, but all carried the same sense of readiness, like they were always waiting for something to happen. Siran was greeted by a tall woman in a dark uniform. Her face was calm, her eyes bright and sharp. "I'm Captain Elena Voss, commander of the Human Expeditionary Fleet," she said, offering her hand. "You must be Siran, our historian guest from Volari." "Yes," Siran replied, bowing slightly. "I am honored, Captain. I was sent to record the events of this alliance." Elena smiled gently. "Then you'll have plenty to write about. The Dravok are coming faster than expected." Her tone was calm, but her words carried a quiet storm. Siran followed her through the command hall where glowing screens displayed the movements of enemy fleets. "The humans are positioned at the center," she explained. "We'll hold the line at Epsilon Gate. If that gate falls, half the galaxy will be open to invasion." Siran looked at the data and frowned. "Your fleet seems small compared to others." Elena turned to him, still calm. "We don't have the biggest ships or the most powerful weapons," she said. "But we have something else." "What is that?" Siran asked. "Fury." The word hung in the air, heavy and mysterious. Siran did not understand. To the Volari, fury was chaos, something to avoid, not admire. But in Elena's voice, the word sounded like a promise. That night, Siran stayed in the observation deck of the station, looking out at the endless stars. Ships moved in formation, preparing for the coming storm. He opened his hollow journal and began recording his thoughts. "Day 1, he wrote. "Humans are not what I expected. They are loud, emotional, and restless, yet there is a fire in them that draws others near. I do not yet understand it, but I can feel its strength." Suddenly, the door opened behind him. Captain Voss entered holding 2 cups of steaming liquid. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "No," Siran admitted. "It's hard to find peace when so many worlds are in danger." Elena nodded. "It's never easy. Fear is normal. Even we feel it. But fear doesn't mean we stop." She handed him one of the cups. "Try this. It's called coffee. It helps us think." Siran took a careful sip. The taste was strong and bitter but warm. "Humans drink this to think?" Elena chuckled softly. "Or to stay awake when the universe is falling apart." They stood together in silence, watching the stars. Siran finally asked, "Why do humans fight? You could have stayed hidden on your home world." Elena looked out the window. "Because hiding never saves anyone. We learned that a long time ago. When we fight, it's not for glory. It's for the chance to live free." Her words carried a deep weight, and Saran felt a strange respect growing in his heart. He realized that humanity's strength was not in their weapons or their ships. It was in their spirit. Days later, the fleets began to move toward Epsilon Gate. The journey through hyperspace was long and silent. Saran spent most of the time watching the humans train and prepare. They worked hard but joked often, laughing even as they loaded weapons or repaired engines. He saw one human technician patting the side of a damaged drone. "Come on, girl," the man said, smiling. "You've got one more fight in you." To Saran, it was strange how humans treated even machines like living friends. They found hope everywhere, even in broken things. Finally, the fleet arrived at Epsilon Gate. It was a massive structure of spinning metal rings and blue energy, connecting to distant worlds. The view was breathtaking, but then came the warning. Dravok swarm approaching from Sector 9. Saran hurried to the command deck. Through the viewport, he saw black shapes emerging from hyperspace. Thousands of Dravok ships like living shadows spread across the void. Their hulls pulsed with strange red light, and the sight made Saran's heart race. The other fleets formed a defensive line. Massive cannons charged, fighters launched. The humans took position in the middle, protecting the core of the formation. Saran stood beside Elena, who was giving calm, precise orders. "All ships power shields to maximum. Prepare missile banks. This is where we stand." "Captain," Saran said nervously, "the Dravok outnumber us 20 to 1. Elena nodded slowly. "Yes, that's about right." Saran stared at her. "And you are still calm?" She looked at him, her expression steady. "We've been here before. Every time we face the impossible, we remind ourselves who we are." "Who are you?" Saran asked quietly. "Humanity," she said simply. "The species that refuses to die." The words echoed in Saran's mind. As the first waves of the Dravok advanced, the stars filled with flashes of light and thunder. The battle had begun, and Saran knew he was witnessing history. He didn't know how long the humans would last, or if any of them would survive. But one thing was clear. They would not run. Not today, not ever. And as he recorded the opening moments of the fight, Saran realized something deep inside himself. This was not just another war. This was the moment when he would learn what true courage looked like. The void before Epsilon Gate was no longer silent. Every sensor, every radar, every ship alarm screamed the same message. The Dravok swarm had arrived. Saran stood in the middle of the human command deck, surrounded by flickering lights and rushing officers. Outside the massive viewport, thousands of enemy ships filled the stars like a moving storm of black wings. The Dravok didn't travel in formation, they swarmed, shifting and pulsing as if the fleet was one living creature. Even after studying hundreds of battles in history, Saran had never seen anything like it. The Valari were scholars. The humans were soldiers. Yet at this moment both races faced the same fear: extinction. Captain Elena Voss stood calmly at the center of the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back. "Fleet-wide communication open channel," she ordered. Her voice was calm, clear, and steady like a lighthouse in the dark. "Attention, all ships," she said. "This is Captain Voss of the human fleet. We hold the line at Epsilon Gate. There is no retreat, no second chance. If the gate falls, the Dravok reach our homes, our children, and everything we love. So today we fight for every world that still has light in its sky. For Earth, for Valari, for everyone." The message echoed across every allied ship. Even Saran felt his heart tighten. Around him, human officers cheered quietly, not with joy but with focus and unity. "Helm, prepare the formation," Elena commanded. "Activate shield arrays. Bring railguns to full charge." The bridge came alive. The floor vibrated under Saran's feet as the engines roared. Giant cannons turned toward the enemy. The human ships, sleek, silver, and smaller than most other fleets, moved with perfect coordination. On the screen, Saran watched as the Valari defense line positioned itself near the gate's outer ring. The Karnath cruisers, large and armored, formed a heavy front. The humans, however, stayed at the center. Saran couldn't understand it. He turned to Elena. "Captain, your ships are exposed in the middle. Shouldn't you stay behind the larger fleets?" Elena looked at him with a small, calm smile. "If the middle falls, the line breaks. We don't hide in the back, Saran. We hold the heart." Before he could reply, the Dravok swarm opened fire. Red beams cut through space, striking against the Allied shields. Explosions flashed across the battlefield. The Volari ships trembled as their shields absorbed the first impacts. Then the human ships answered. Missiles streaked across the dark, guided by precise calculations. Railguns fired glowing projectiles that tore through the first line of Dravok vessels. The battle had begun. Saran gripped the edge of a console as the ship shook violently. Sparks flew from the walls. One of the officers shouted, "Front shields down to 72%. Recharging in progress." "Maintain position," Elena said firmly. "Target priority, swarm clusters Gamma and Theta." "Fire on my mark," she waited. The enemy ships moved closer, too close, Saran thought. But Elena didn't panic. Her eyes followed the enemy patterns carefully. Mark. Every human ship fired at once. Thousands of missiles exploded in perfect synchronization, creating a bright wave that shattered the Dravok front line. For a moment, the stars lit up like dawn. Even Saran gasped. How did you know where to strike?" Elena didn't look away from the screen. "We studied their movement. The swarm isn't chaos, it's rhythm. You just have to hear the beat." Her words carried both science and poetry. Saran realized the humans were not just fighting. They were listening to the enemy, learning as they moved. But victory didn't last long. New Dravok ships emerged from hyperspace, larger and more monstrous. Their weapons glowed with a darker red light. One of the Karnath battleships exploded under the first strike, breaking formation. "The Karnath line is collapsing," someone shouted. Saran looked at Elena in fear. "If they fall, the Dravok will reach the gate." Elena didn't hesitate. "Signal Fleet Delta, move to intercept. Divert the Argus and Horizon to Sector 4, but that will leave your own flank exposed." Elena gave him a brief glance. "Then we'll just have to hold it ourselves." The Resolute, her flagship, turned sharply and sped forward. Saran stumbled as the ship accelerated. The human fleet followed, forming a wedge that drove straight into the thickest part of the swarm. Through the viewport, Saran saw the impossible. Tiny human ships diving through giant enemy vessels, dodging plasma blasts and striking with perfect timing. Their weapons were smaller, their armor thinner, but their precision made every shot count. He could hear the radio chatter from pilots, their voices filled with determination. "Eagle 3 engaging target Alpha. Copy that, lock and fire. We're losing the left wing, keep pushing." And above all, Elena's calm voice, "Hold formation. Every second we stand, another world gets to breathe." Saran's recording device trembled in his hands. He realized he was not just documenting a war. He was witnessing something that would change history. An hour into the battle, the Allied fleets were breaking apart. The Volari ships had fallen back to repair damage. The Karnath were retreating. Only the humans remained in the center, surrounded on all sides. Saran watched the radar screen in horror. "We're surrounded!" Elena simply said, "Then they can't miss us." Before Saran could understand, she ordered, "Activate the Aegis pulse. Charge all reactors." The human ships glowed with bright blue light. A wave of energy exploded outward, forming a massive shield around the fleet. The Dravok weapon struck it, but the shield held. For a few precious minutes, the humans stood like a wall of light in the darkness. Saran was speechless. You are fighting the impossible." Elena turned toward him, eyes calm but fierce. That's what humans do best. Minutes turned into hours. The fleet took heavy damage. The Argus lost half its engines. The Horizon was hit and went silent. But the humans refused to withdraw. Every time a ship was lost, another filled its place. Every time the enemy broke through, a new squadron launched to push them back. Saran could see the exhaustion in their faces, sweat, bruises, trembling hands, but not one of them stopped. At last, the Resolute shook violently as another blast struck its hull. Alarms screamed. "Main engine offline," shouted the engineer. "We've lost the rear cannons." Elena gritted her teeth. "Route all power to the forward shields. If we fall facing them." Saran could not hold his emotions. "You cannot win. You must retreat." Elena turned to him sharply, but not in anger. Her voice softened. "If we run, the swarm follows. If we stand, maybe someone else will live. That's the choice we made long before today." Her words echoed in the burning bridge. Saran felt tears in his eyes, not of sadness but of awe. He finally understood what she meant when she said humans fought with fury. It wasn't blind rage. It was the courage to keep going when hope was gone. Then came the final order. "Captain," said her first officer, "the Dravok flagship is powering its main cannon." If it fires, the gate will collapse. Elena nodded slowly. Then we hit it first. All remaining ships focus fire on the flagship. This is it. The humans fired everything they had left. Missiles, plasma rounds, railguns, all of it. The Dravok flagship returned fire, shaking the human fleet apart. But in the middle of the chaos, the Resolute charged straight at the enemy. Saran watched in disbelief. You're going toward them? Yes, Elena said quietly. If they want the gate, they'll have to go through us. The two massive ships collided in a storm of light and fire. The explosion that followed was so bright that even the sensors went blind. When the light faded, the Dravok flagship was broken in half, drifting into the void. The human fleet floated in silence, half destroyed but victorious, for now. As the battle ended, Saran stood among the surviving crew. The stars outside were filled with wreckage, both Dravok and human. Elena stood quietly by the viewport, her uniform torn and her hands bleeding, but her eyes still steady. Saran whispered, "You stopped them." "For now," she nodded. "For now." He looked at her, unable to hide his amazement. "How do you keep fighting when everything seems lost?" Elena turned to him with a tired smile. "Because we've seen what happens when good people stop fighting." Outside, the silence of victory was heavy, almost sacred. Saran realized that this was not the end of the war, but it was the moment when the galaxy would remember what humanity truly was. Not the strongest, not the oldest, but the ones who refused to break. Silence filled the command deck of the Resolute. The great battle was over, yet the sound of it still echoed inside every soul. Broken ships drifted in the darkness, some burning slowly, others cold and lifeless. The stars seemed dimmer, as if they too mourned what had been lost. Saran stood near the viewport, staring at the endless field of debris. Pieces of human ships floated past, some still glowing with fading light. Among them, he saw one hull fragment with painted words barely visible. "Hope rises." It made his chest tighten. Behind him, Captain Elena Voss stood tall despite her exhaustion. Her uniform was torn, her face pale, but her eyes remained unbroken. Around her, the remaining crew worked silently, tending to fires, repairing systems, and checking for survivors. The air smelled faintly of smoke and metal. "How many ships are left?" Elena asked quietly. Her officer hesitated before answering. 11, Captain. Out of 40. Saran lowered his head. The number echoed painfully in his mind. 11 ships. Hundreds gone. Thousands of lives lost. Yet they had held the gate. The Dravok fleet had retreated for now, but the victory felt heavy, like a wound that refused to close. Elena took a deep breath. "Begin search and rescue. Any ship still transmitting, we bring them home." Her voice carried the strength of command, but Saran could sense the sorrow beneath it. She carried every loss like it was her own. Hours passed as rescue operations began. Small shuttles moved through the wreckage, picking up escape pods and survivors. Saran joined one of the teams, wanting to record what he saw with his own eyes. The void was silent except for the soft hum of the shuttle's engines. Everywhere he looked, he saw the remains of bravery, broken ships, shattered wings, and the frozen faces of soldiers who had fought till their last breath. In one drifting pod, they found 3 human engineers still alive. One of them smiled weakly when Saran helped open the hatch. "You Valari are gentlefolk," the man said softly. "Didn't think you'd come out here with us?" Saran looked at him kindly. "I could not let history forget what you did here." The man nodded, eyes half closed. "Then tell them we fought, not for orders, but for each other." Those words stayed in Saran's heart long after the man was carried away for medical care. When Saran returned to the Resolute, the atmosphere was darker. The reports were worse than before. Many ships could not be repaired. Supplies were low. And deep in the black distance, scanners still showed movement, signs that the Dravok were regrouping. Saran entered the command deck and found Elena studying a large holographic map. Her expression was serious. "They're coming again," she said quietly without turning. Saran's throat tightened. "Again after all this destruction?" "The Dravok don't stop," Elena said. "They'll send more ships through the gate." "We may have only hours," Saran hesitated. "Can we escape?" She finally turned toward him, and he saw the truth in her eyes. "No, the gate's energy is unstable. If it stays open, they'll pour through until every world burns. The only way to stop them is to destroy the gate itself." Saran felt cold. "Destroy the gate?" Elena nodded slowly. Yes, the energy reaction would seal the wormhole forever. But that would... Saran's voice broke. That would destroy everything near it, including this fleet. Yes, Elena said softly. Including us. For a moment, there was only silence. Saran couldn't find words. The humans around them continued working calmly, as if they already knew their fate and had accepted it. Is there no other way? He finally asked. Elena gave a faint smile. There's always another way, but sometimes it costs more lives this way. Only ours. Saran's hands trembled. You're going to sacrifice your fleet? She met his eyes. We're going to save the galaxy. The next few hours passed in quiet determination. The humans called it Nova Protocol, a last resort maneuver that combined all ship reactors into one massive energy pulse. It would create a blast powerful enough to collapse the wormhole. Saran watched as engineers worked tirelessly, connecting energy lines between ships. Pilots helped program the synchronization codes. There was no panic, no anger, only calm focus. He recorded every detail, every face, every word. In the mess hall, soldiers shared their last meal. Some joked. Some sang old Earth songs. A few wrote letters they knew would never be sent. Saran walked among them, feeling like a small candle among stars that were burning out. He stopped when he heard two young soldiers talking quietly. Do you think anyone will remember us? One asked, the other smiled. Maybe not by name, but they'll live because we did this. That's enough. Saran had to look away. His eyes were wet, though he didn't understand why. These humans were strangers to him, yet their courage touched something deep inside him, a truth his own peaceful people had forgotten. Later, in the command room, Elena stood ready in front of the holomap. Her officers waited for her signal. Saran approached her slowly. Captain, please, allow me to send a message to my people. They must know what you are doing, she nodded. Of course. Let the galaxy know humanity stood its ground. Saran activated his recorder and began to speak, his voice trembling. This is Saran of Valari, historian of the Alliance. I stand aboard the human flagship Resolute as they prepare an act beyond courage. They are not fighting for victory now. They are fighting so others may have a future. If this recording survives, let it be known. They did not fall in fear. They rose in hope. When he finished, Elena placed a hand on his shoulder. Thank you, Saran. You've been brave to stay with us. I only wish I could do more, he whispered. You already are, she said softly. You're witnessing what we stand for. That's how stories outlive death. When the preparations were complete, all human ships linked into one massive formation. Energy beams connected them, glowing with blue-white light. The gate ahead pulsed wildly, the wormhole twisting like a living wound. Elena's voice echoed through every speaker. All units, this is Captain Voss. The Dravok are returning. You know your orders. There will be no retreat, no surrender, no regret. We do this for every voice that still sings, for every child who still dreams, and for every world that still has a sunrise. May humanity burn bright. Saran felt his breath catch. He turned toward the viewport and saw the Dravok ships appearing again, endless and dark. But this time they didn't face a frightened fleet. They faced a wall of light. The humans fired everything, missiles, plasma, railguns, holding the swarm back long enough for the Nova charge to build. Saran could feel the vibration in the floor as energy levels rose higher and higher. 30 seconds to overload, said the engineer. Elena looked around the bridge, her eyes meeting each crew member. It's been an honor. One by one they nodded. No one ran. No one cried. Saran's recorder shook in his hands. Captain, what will happen to you? Elena smiled softly. We'll become the light that stops the dark. The countdown reached 10. Outside, the gate began to collapse inward. The Dravok fleet tried to flee, but the energy pulled them in like a storm. Then came the final second. Elena's voice whispered one last order. Activate Nova. A burst of white light exploded across the stars. For a brief moment, everything was silent, so silent that Saran thought time had stopped. Then the shockwave came, brilliant and endless. When it ended, the wormhole was gone. The Dravok fleet was gone. And the human ships were gone too. Saran's shuttle, protected by emergency shielding, drifted among the fading light. He stared at the empty space where the fleet had been. There was no sound, only peace. He whispered into his recorder, voice breaking. They did it. The humans did it. The gate is sealed. They saved us all. Tears rolled down his face, not from sadness alone, but from deep respect. He realized he had witnessed something no historian could ever describe fully. A sacrifice beyond reason. A courage beyond fear. As he turned his ship toward home, he looked once more at the dark sky and whispered, "Farewell, humans. The galaxy will remember your light." The war was over, but the silence that followed felt heavy. The once bright skies of Epsilon Gate were now empty, only filled with drifting remains of ships that had given everything. Saran stood on the viewing deck of the Valari ship Eterna Dawn, his reflection faintly glowing against the starlight. He could still see the last image of the human fleet in his mind, their ships burning like 1,000 suns before vanishing into the great light. Weeks had passed, yet Saran could not forget the sound of Captain Elena Voss's final words. Her voice had carried through the comms just before the explosion. "Tell them we stood. Saran. Tell them humanity stood for all." Those words echoed in his heart every day. The Valari Council summoned Saran to deliver his full record of the Battle of Epsilon Gate. He was not only a historian now, he was the last witness to humanity's greatest act. As he entered the great hall of Valari Prime, every seat was filled. Diplomats, generals, and leaders from dozens of races. They all waited to hear his account. When Saran began to speak, the room was silent. He told them about the human fleet, how small it was and how they refused to retreat even when every calculation said defeat was certain. He told them about Captain Voss, who smiled before activating the Nova Protocol, knowing it would cost everything. He told them that in that final light he saw something beyond strength. He saw love. Many in the room wiped their eyes. Others sat frozen, unable to find words. When he finished, there was a long silence before the Valari Prime Minister stood and said softly, "The humans did not fight for power. They fought for life itself, and with that, a decision was made." In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to change. Across countless worlds, monuments were raised for humanity, the race that had vanished but left behind a legacy that would never fade. The Valari built the Monument of Light, a tall crystal spire glowing softly at night. It was said to represent the final explosion of the human fleet, a reminder of courage, hope, and unity. The Karnath people, who were once proud warriors, changed their war anthem to one that honored the humans. Even the distant Alkar Dominion, known for their cold and logical minds, began to teach human philosophy in their schools. A great alliance was born, one that stretched across hundreds of systems. It was called the Human Pact, not because humans still ruled, but because their spirit now guided all others. Saran was chosen as the historian of the new alliance. His task was to record the rebuilding of the galaxy and make sure no one ever forgot the lesson humanity had given them. But deep inside, Saran felt a quiet sorrow. He missed them. The humans had been different. They laughed in the face of fear. They made jokes before impossible battles. They cared for strangers like family. Saran had traveled with dozens of species during his life, but no one had made him feel so alive, so inspired. Human years passed, but Saran continued his work faithfully. He traveled from planet to planet, documenting how the human pact grew. He saw old enemies become allies. He saw species that once hated each other now share meals, trade resources, and build new cities together. Everywhere he went, he told the same story, of the day humans stood alone so others could live. One day, he visited the Academy of Stellar History on the planet Lysara, where young students were gathered to learn about the Great War. The children were of many species, blue-skinned, feathered, scaled, and furred. But when Saran began to speak, every one of them sat in silence, eyes wide with wonder. He told them about Captain Elena Voss, about her calm voice and brave heart. He described how humans fought not for themselves, but for the galaxy. When he finished, a small child raised his hand and asked softly, "Mr. Saran, do you think the humans knew they would die?" Saran nodded gently. "Yes, they knew," the child frowned. "Then why didn't they run away?" Saran smiled sadly. "Because running away would have meant letting the darkness win. And humans, they never let darkness win." The room fell silent again, but it was a warm silence, full of respect and hope. That night, as Saran returned to his ship, he looked up at the stars. He wondered where the humans would have gone if they had survived. Could any of them still be out there, Lost in some forgotten corner of the galaxy? For years, the question followed him. The records showed that every human ship was destroyed in the Nova explosion. Still, Saran could not accept that such a bright species could vanish completely. And then one day, something unexpected happened. Saran was on a research station orbiting the red star Kellis 4, studying ancient transmission logs from the war. The equipment was old and most of the data was corrupted. But as he filtered through the static, he found a faint signal, a sound buried deep within the noise. It repeated every few seconds, 3 short beeps, then silence. Then again, Saran's heart began to race. He adjusted the frequency, cleaned the distortion, and then heard a voice. Weak, broken, but unmistakably human. "This is Captain Elena Voss to any Allied vessel. We are alive. Repeat. We are alive." Saran froze. His eyes widened as he replayed the message again and again. It couldn't be. The transmission was old, delayed by distance, but it was real. Humanity had survived, at least a part of it. Without hesitation, Saran reported the finding to the Human Pact Council. The chamber erupted in excitement. Leaders from every species demanded details, and fleets began preparing for a rescue mission. But Saran insisted that he go first. He had been the one to witness their sacrifice. He would be the one to bring them home. The journey took weeks. The coordinates from the signal led to a remote star system on the edge of known space. The area was filled with dust clouds and broken asteroids, a forgotten graveyard of old battles. As the Eterna Dawn approached, Saran's sensors picked up the source of the signal. A single human ship, drifting silently near a dead moon. The hull was scarred, the engines dead, and parts of it were frozen from exposure. But the human insignia was still there, a blue and white flag that once stood for courage. Saran's heart pounded. He sent a message, but there was no response. So he boarded the ship himself, stepping through corridors coated in frost. His steps echoed softly. The air smelled of old metal and dust. He reached the cryo bay, and there, behind a cracked glass pod, lay a figure in a faded uniform. It was her. Captain Elena Voss. She looked peaceful, as if merely sleeping after a long journey. The cryosystem still glowed faintly, holding the last breath of life. Saran's eyes filled with tears. "You kept your promise," he whispered. He activated the revival sequence. The pod hissed as warm air filled the chamber. Minutes passed before her eyes slowly opened. Calm, sharp, the same as the day he last saw her. She looked around weakly. "Where am I?" Saran knelt beside her. "You're safe, Captain. The war is over. The galaxy remembers you." Her gaze softened. "The Dravok, are they gone?" Saran nodded. "Yes, you stopped them. You stopped everything." Elena smiled faintly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then it was worth it." Back on Valari Prime, when the news spread that a human had returned, billions gathered to celebrate. The lost daughter of Earth had come back, a living symbol of hope. The human pact grew stronger than ever before, united not by fear but by faith in what humanity had shown them. And for Saran, the long silence in his heart was finally broken. He no longer felt the emptiness of loss, only gratitude. He had witnessed the end of one age and the rebirth of another. As he looked at the night sky, he whispered softly, "The galaxy sleeps under your light, Captain. Humanity's fire still burns, not in weapons but in every heart that believes in tomorrow." The galaxy was quiet now, but the memory of fire and light still lingered in every corner of the stars. Planets that had once feared the Dravok swarm were rebuilding. Cities rose from ashes, trade routes reopened, and the alliance of species that called themselves the Human Pact flourished. Yet for many, the memory of the human fleet that had sacrificed everything still haunted them. Saran's ship, the Eterna Dawn, drifted through the silent void, carrying the greatest treasure he had ever found, Captain Elena Voss. After months in cryo-sleep, she had awakened, weak but alive, and now she gazed out of the viewport at the endless stars with quiet wonder. "Saran," she whispered, her voice soft. "Is it really over?" "For now," he replied. "The Dravok will not return for many cycles thanks to you and your fleet. The galaxy has a chance to breathe." Elena nodded slowly, her eyes distant. "And the humans? Are there others?" Saran shook his head. "No one we know. You are the last, Captain. But the stories of what you did, your courage, have already reached every system. You are no longer alone. Humanity lives in every heart that believes in freedom and hope. She smiled faintly. Then it is enough. When Saran returned to Valari Prime, the news spread instantly. Crowds gathered in the streets, ships hovered above, and leaders of dozens of species waited at the spaceport to witness the first living human in decades. The moment was like the rebirth of a legend. Elena stepped down from the shuttle, supported by Saran. She looked around at the crowd, seeing not fear or war, but admiration. The citizens of Valari, the representatives of the Karnath Irics, and even the distant Alcar Dominion, all bowed respectfully. They had heard the story, but now they saw proof. The woman who had stood alone at Epsilon Gate, whose courage had shaped the galaxy's future. Children of all species ran forward, waving flags and banners that depicted human symbols of courage, the blue and white insignia, images of ships bursting into light, and phrases that had echoed through history. Humans stood, so others may live. Saran's heart swelled with pride. He had witnessed so much death, so much sacrifice, and now he saw the true result, hope that would last generations. Elena was taken to the Council of the Human Pact, where representatives from every allied species gathered. The chamber was enormous, with walls made of reflective crystal and floors that shimmered with light. Saran walked beside her, quietly observing as the leaders bowed in respect. The council president, a tall Valari named Loretha, spoke first. "Captain Elena Voss," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "we owe humanity a debt beyond calculation. Your courage saved millions of lives. Your sacrifice inspired billions. Today we honor you not only as a warrior, but as a symbol of hope." Elena bowed humbly. "I did not act for honor," she said softly. "I acted so that others could live freely. If I am remembered, let it be for what all humans stood for every life that matters." Applause filled the chamber. Saran recorded every word, knowing these moments would inspire generations to come. In the months that followed, Elena helped rebuild human society, or rather, the fragments of it that had survived. Using old records, supplies scattered across allied planets, and the support of countless species, she slowly revived the human fleet, one ship at a time. The first new ship launched from the Valari shipyards was named Hope's Flame. It was a modest vessel, but it carried the essence of everything humans stood for: courage, sacrifice, and determination. Elena stood on its bridge for the maiden voyage, looking at the stars where her fleet once fell. Saran watched silently, recording her every action. He could see it now. Humanity was not fragile. It was not weak. It was unbreakable. Even when the odds were impossible, even when death seemed certain, they refused to give in, and the galaxy had learned from that lesson. Beyond the human revival, Saran noticed something remarkable. Species that had once fought each other over territory, resources, or pride now worked together in ways they never had before. Trade routes were shared. Defense systems were coordinated. Knowledge and technology were exchanged freely. It was a new era, one born from the fire of human courage. Saran often walked among the human crews, noting the way they treated each other, their camaraderie, their humor, their ability to turn fear into determination. One day he overheard a pilot joking with an engineer. "Remember when the Dravok thought we were weak?" The pilot laughed. The engineer grinned. "Yeah, they should have seen us coming." Saran smiled to himself. That was humanity, small in size perhaps, but enormous in spirit. Years passed. The human fleet grew steadily. Planets across the galaxy sent ships, supplies, and volunteers. Even some species who had never met humans joined the effort, inspired by the stories of Captain Voss and her crew. On Earth, the humans who had survived in secret began to emerge. They were few, but they carried the memory of sacrifice and courage. Elena greeted them personally, welcoming them to the new age of humanity in the galaxy. "We rebuild," she told them, "not to fight for ourselves, but to honor those who gave everything for life." Her words spread quickly, and soon the Earth colonies became centers of learning, diplomacy, and hope, places where humans taught others about courage, unity, and the power of refusing to give up. Saran continued to write his histories, now filled not only with war and sacrifice but with hope and renewal. He traveled to distant systems, recording the rebuilding of cities, the revival of planets, and the growth of alliances. Every page he wrote carried the message: courage is not measured by size or strength, but by the heart that refuses to yield. One quiet evening, he returned to the bridge of the Eterna Dawn. Elena stood beside him, looking out at the stars. "Siran," she said softly, "do you think the galaxy will ever forget?" He shook his head. "No, not after what you did. Humanity's light will shine forever," she smiled faintly. "Then our job is done. We fought, we protected, and now we leave the rest to the future." Siran nodded. "And what a future it will be. Everywhere I go, people speak of humans not as fragile creatures, but as legends of courage." Elena placed a hand on his shoulder. "And now we live to make those legends real." From that day forward, humanity became a symbol, not only of strength, but of hope. Their ship sailed the stars once more, not to conquer, but to protect. Captain Elena Voss led the first fleet of the reborn humans, showing the galaxy that courage, sacrifice, and unity could defeat even the darkest threats. Siran's records became required reading across the human pact. Children of all species learned about the day humans stood at Epsilon Gate, the day they faced impossible odds, and the day they became the heart of a united galaxy. The galaxy had changed forever, not because humans were the largest, the oldest, or the strongest, but because they had shown what it meant to fight for life, for hope, and for each other. And somewhere in the stars, Siran whispered softly, recording the final words in his history, "I once believed fury was destruction, but now I know it is the fire that protects life, and no fire burns brighter than that of humankind." The galaxy listened.